2025 has been a strange year for die-hard Star Citizen fans. We've seen plenty of busy work, new loops, endless polish passes, endless bug fixes, but not much that truly moved the game forward since Pyro's long-awaited release late last year. Sure, the player counts are up, sales are strong, and on the surface, the verse has never looked more alive. But underneath, a lot of the long-awaited citizens are starting to ask the same question. Where's the substance? And I think CIG knows it. They've felt the fatigue. I believe CitizenCon 2955 is where they're going to fight to win that excitement back. This year won't be about promises or prototypes. I think this year is going to be about showing us something real, something tangible. I'm Citizen Chaos, and today I'm breaking down what I believe we'll see at CitizenCon, and why this year might finally be a turning point for Star Citizen's future. I'm going to start out bold here, and I'm going to say that I think we're going to see engineering, and I think that we're actually going to see it in-game by the end of this year. Now, they did essentially a playable thing back in August of last year, where they had engineering, and a lot of people took a lot of screenshots and videos and stuff of it at that point. I think it's probably actually evolved quite a bit since then. So I think it's about time that they at least give us an update. Now, the reason that I say I think we'll see it by the year's end, I know that they're actively working on the Kraken, and I don't think they can afford to put the Kraken in-game without having engineering in first. The Idris was one thing, but they kind of dug themselves a bit of a hole with the Idris. The problem with the Kraken is I see it being a lot more desirable by solo players, and if you include it in the game without engineering, you're really setting the expectation that they'll be able to use the Kraken going forward for mining expeditions and salvage expeditions, etc. I think they're really setting themselves up for failure even more than they did with the Idris if they release the Kraken without releasing engineering. So again, I think we're going to see it by year's end. This next one is a bit of a two-parter. Nyx is the first part. Now, if you're not familiar, Nyx is a brand new star system, very similar to Pyro, and I think we're going to see it by the end of this year. Now, a lot of the leaks that have been coming out and a lot of the things that I'm reading about, I think this is more and more possible. If you had asked me 2 weeks ago, I don't even think it would have made this list. But I do believe that they're going to give us at least a preview just to try and get some excitement up for that very large year-end release. I think they still need it this year. Content is one thing, but I think the community is really just driving for something of a bit of substance. Now, along with it, I think you're going to see a series of missions that kind of encourage people to visit Nyx. And I think they're actually going to do more of a content-driven theme again next year. So I think that the Nyx system is actually going to play a very large role in the narrative that plays out next year. It actually worked pretty well this year. I think they'll try and continue it again. Now, obviously with Nyx, you'll probably also see the People's Alliance introduced. You'll probably see everything that goes with that. Like just all the different characters, all of the different weapons, and just kind of a different take on the verse that you would expect from a new star system. Now, the second part to this one, I think we're actually going to see the Vanduul. Now, I know that they're doing a lot of ship reworks, and I know that they've got a couple of ships in the pipeline that we'll more than likely see. Whether we get to fly them or just the Vanduul, I'm not sure. But I absolutely think that we're going to see the Vanduul in-game as part of Nyx. And therefore, I think we're actually going to see a preview of it at CitizenCon. Now, I'll go as far as to say I think we'll see them flying, but I think we're actually also going to get some FPS missions for them. Again, I think it'll play out as part of the narrative next year. I know that we've already seen kind of dead Vanduul in the game. I know that they already exist in Squadron 42. And I suspect that they've been bringing over bits and pieces of them with a lot of the other assets that they're bringing over from Squadron 42 as well. So we'll see. I mean, we can hope, right? I do believe that when Jared had said a few Star Citizen lives ago that there's something that's coming by the end of the year that's really going to change the way that the verse is forever, I think this is what he was referring to. The first alien creatures in-game as actual creatures, like FPS-type creatures, I think that's an absolute game changer. Like I touched on before as well, I do think that we're going to see some new ships that are actually introduced as part of Nyx and the Vanduul being brought into the game, but I'll cover that off in a few minutes here. So next up, I think that we're actually going to see a lot of attention being given to adding new creatures into the game, just to give it a bit of life. I know that they've done a decent job actually this year of adding in creatures as they go, but I think they're going to continue along that line. Now, my guess was going to be that we'd see the Yormandi in game before the year's end. Now, just a little bit of a post-edit addition here. I know that there's actually leaks coming out that they're basically adding it into the latest patch, so that one's kind of a freebie for me. I'm pretty sure that'll be out in the latest patch. It'll be kind of the boss fight. It'll try to help wrap up some of the storylines from this year. But I do think that we'll probably see a lot more passive animals brought in, and in preparation for farming and ranching gameplay, which I think will come in the following year. I don't think we're going to see that next year. You could possibly also see a new variant of the Valakar, and who knows what other kind of creatures they actually have. I mean, we all know that there's a big list of creatures they want to bring in. They're obviously going to probably bring in some new hostile creatures, but I think a lot of focus will be brought in to bringing creatures in because it gives that life to the game. Next up, I think we're going to see some additions made to guilds and try to standardize along with their plan they presented last year. Now, we could potentially see a new guild brought in, maybe the Sports Federation. I don't remember the exact name of it. We could possibly see kind of the furthering of the council brought in, really in preparation for re-ownering, if you will, changing the owner on ships. There's a lot that they can actually do here. And I think just in general, we'll probably see a move towards guild gameplay and even progression within the guilds. So I do think it's very likely that they'll talk about that in CitizenCon this year, because I know that they've said that they really want to focus CitizenCon Direct this year on the things that they're going to deliver in the next 12 months. I'll leave it at that. But that's why this is kind of a cross between the things we'll see in the next 12 months and CitizenCon, because I think all of it's going to be shown. And guilds, I think, will definitely be one of those. Now, alongside guilds, I think we are actually going to see the introduction of some level of org tools. That this may not be brought fully into the game, but I have the oddest feeling that with the new website that had launched a little while ago, they've got some actually hooks and some solid foundation to build org tools, at least online. So I think we're going to see the furthering of those org tools. Now, like I say, I'm not sure if we're going to see the final version by the year's end. They'll probably tease it a little bit more at CitizenCon like they did last year. But I do think that we'll at least see some progress. So there's very likely that they'll talk about it and kind of brag it up at CitizenCon as well. The other thing that's really supporting this to me is the recent changes to show party members in a different color. To me, that's a good indicator that they're really stepping in that direction. Now, whether they actually talk about it at CitizenCon or we just kind of see it, that has yet to be seen. I mean, it is only a 2-hour CitizenCon too. I'm going to go bold here, and I'm going to say I think we see some level of crafting talked about at CitizenCon, because I do think that they're going to try and get it into the game, at least at some level, within the next year. The recent changes to Salvage gameplay are kind of supporting this for me as well, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see it sooner rather than later in next year. Now, it's definitely not going to be the final version, but I do think, like I say, that they'll actually talk about the future plans or what's actually changed with crafting. Now, right alongside of this, I think they're actually going to show off some level of base building, definitely not as long as last year's, but some level of updates to base building and at least talk about the progress they're making in that direction. Now, I don't think we'll actually see it next year. So this one actually breaks the idea that, for me anyways, that they'll only show things that they're talking about. Sorry, they'll only talk about things that they're actually going to deliver. Okay. It kind of breaks that mentality, but I think that they're very excited about base building, and a lot of the community is really excited with them. I think it's worthwhile talking about it. Now, I do think that we're going to get further explanation on what blueprints look like at CitizenCon as well. I know they touched on them last year, but I think they'll go deeper in depth with what blueprints actually are. And I do think we'll actually probably see it within the next year, the introduction of blueprints. And I think the functionality will be limited. Like, I don't think you'll necessarily be able to upgrade them, but I do think that they're going to introduce blueprints along with all of the items that you're granted. Just kind of moving the community towards that as opposed to actually giving physical items. Now, next up, ships. I mean, ships are always a large part of the game, but ships are really what are driving the sales in the game at the moment. So I think that they'll actually spend a decent amount of time again this year. My guess is like upwards of half an hour even, talking about the ships that they have delivered and the ships that they want to deliver in the next 12 months. Again, these drive a lot of the sales, and it's a really relatively easy thing to add into the game without changing a lot of the fundamentals while they're trying to spend a lot more time in finishing up Squadron next year. Now, we'll build the first one, and I think we're actually going to see our first refining ship. I think it's about time. I think that they'll probably try to introduce it sooner rather than later. To me, it makes sense with the recent changes to Salvage that are coming in, that they'll actually surprise us with some form of player-based refining. Now, as far as ships that we'll actually see released at CitizenCon, I think the Anvil Paladin is kind of a gimme. I am pretty sure everybody's expecting to actually see it, so I won't spend a lot of time talking about that. Now, the Hull B, I think, is also a very likely candidate to be talked about and bragged about. It's not necessarily the shiniest of ships, but it does fill kind of a need between the Hull A and the Hull C. Now, I personally think that they'll release this with the Nyx star system to try to reinforce the idea of transporting cargo between different systems. It would be a likely time to introduce it anyways. Now, I do think that they'll give us some sort of update, hopefully a walkthrough of the Ironclad and the Ironclad Assault. I don't think it'll be released as part of CitizenCon this year. I really hope it was, but just reading the monthly updates, I don't think that's likely anymore. But I think they'll at least give us some form of walkthrough or update or information. I know the community's really excited about it. Personally, I think we'll probably see it around Invictus/DefenseCon next year. It's kind of a likely ship to be brought in at that point. Another likely ship that we'll probably see at CitizenCon, if I had to guess, is the new RSI Salvage ship. I know they talked about it earlier in the year. It was kind of a spoiler at that point, really early in development. But if you tie that alongside of the Wolf, which has already been released, I think they're further along on this than they're really talking about. And given the salvage changes that we're currently seeing, it's a very logical fit. They didn't really talk about anything other than the Fortune and the Vulture and the Reclaimer. They missed the Fortune, sorry. And I think that the new RSI salvage ship is kind of a nice fit in there as well. So I think we'll probably actually see that released at CitizenCon. Finally, they'll probably talk about, or at least show a silhouette for the RSI Perseus. I'm pretty sure everyone does not believe that's coming at CitizenCon, although I would love to see it. But I don't think that they'll release it because of the competition with the Paladin. So I think logically we'll actually see that one later in the year with IAE. Now, I think that they'll also probably tease a medium consolidated outland ship. It's logical, given the fact that they were working on the Pioneer. I don't think they are currently anymore. I'm not sure, actually. But I think that they need to build up the assets for a consolidated outland, and it makes sense that they would actually introduce a medium ship with it. Now, I do think we'll probably see at least teased a freight variant of the RSI Apollo as well, which I think it needs. I really love the way that the RSI Apollo is, but I don't see the gameplay for me personally, or really a reason to buy the ship. So that would end up being a lot of kind of wasted time put into a framework, and it would actually make a very nice cargo ship. And finally, I think we'll actually see some form of crafting vehicle / crafting station or something along those lines. A little bit more on why I think that in a minute or two here. But I think along with crafting, we'll actually see a crafting vehicle at least teased. So for these next two, I'm really going off the wall on these two. I think we'll actually see the introduction of personal Habs. At least teased at CitizenCon, and I do believe released within the next year. Now, it's actually not that far of a leap, considering we already have personal instanced hangers. And at the same time, it is actually a nice step towards base building, which I do think we're probably going to see at least the beginnings of the year following. So in 2027, I think we'll probably see some big base building stuff. So personal Habs would be a logical thing to fit in the next year. And it's completely different. It's something for people to get excited about, something to personalize. I think they're giving us a lot of swag that we don't necessarily have anything to do with. There's a lot of stuff that I could put in my hangar that I get as like a subscriber, and the stuff that you earn as part of the different mission systems and stuff, but there's really nowhere to put it. I mean, a hangar is more of an industrial area. There's no real place to put things like a couch. I mean, there's areas, but logically, why would you do that? Now, right along the same lines, I think that we'll actually see the expansion of personal hangers, or at least the customization of them. I think they're going to move closer to what they originally had planned for hangers, in the sense that they will have different varieties of hangers, potentially different modules that you can actually bolt on to your hanger, kind of change up exactly how they look. So I don't think that New Babbage and Orison are always going to be the ones that have the nice hanger anymore. I think that's actually going to be an upgrade that you can earn. I say nice, but I mean nice is subjective, of course. But I think that's something that you can probably earn, or knowing them, buy. But I can also see them adding different modules, such as a medical module, cargo module, maybe even just a blank room, a meeting, a showcase room, some sort of storage room, a crafting room. Really think the possibilities here are actually quite endless. And I can't see it actually being that far of a leap from what we already have. So to me, it might be an easy win on something that can be worked on while they're working on Squadron. Now, up next, things I don't think that we're actually going to see. And just some honorable mentions here. Flight blades, and along with that NPC crew. I don't think that they're going to talk about it. I think it's going to be one of those hush-hush things that they really don't know how they're going to do it yet. It's really a balanced nightmare when you think about it to try and introduce those, because when you have a solo player flying a ship like a Polaris, the fundamental question is how much power should that player actually have? I mean, I have my own personal feelings about this, as does every other person on the planet. Personally, I think that they should be able to fly it. The NPC crew or the flight blades should make the ship, basically it should put it in a defensible position, but it should not necessarily allow me to be offensive with it. I should not be able to go out and attack things. But I don't think that they have the hooks in the game to figure out if I'm attempting to attack somebody or if somebody else is attacking me. That's a very fine line to try and walk. And I don't think that they fully understand the balance that they are going to be implementing, so I don't think that they're going to be bold enough to try to talk about it at CitizenCon this year. Along the same lines, I don't think that we're going to see a lot of movement or anything presented really for farming and ranching that they talked about last year. I think that's pretty well understood. I don't think that there's necessarily anything else to really talk about until such time as they actually release it. The other one that I would love to see, but I highly doubt that we will, is some form of talk about ground harvesting outside of the FPS that we have today. So the idea of putting basically some form of machine on top of the ground to suck stuff out of the ground. I don't think they're ready for it yet, and I don't think that they're going to provide any more details at CitizenCon this year about it. Anyway, let me know what you think. What do you think we're going to see in CitizenCon this year? I'm really excited to hear your opinions and see if there's anything that I missed. Or if you think that I am completely out there in suggesting one of these other ideas. Let me know. Again, I'm really interested in your opinions here. This has been another video by Citizen Chaos, and I can't wait to see you in the verse.